It's
the
not,
back
bec-
of it.
it's
Oh, no?
not because I paused it,
Okay.
but your first couple words are not in the video.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. So today it's Harmonious Church. That's why you came, because that message came across, huh? All right. So what we're going to talk about roles and goals. It's the end of a year, the beginning of a new year. It's convenient to use January 1st as a demarcation point, but it's not necessary. We don't. We can decide anytime we want to that we need to change a behavior. We can decide anytime we want to that we're going to establish a new goal. But January 1st, everybody's doing it. What the heck? We might as well go along with the program. But what we want to do is actually this year, perhaps, will be the year that all the things that we wanted to do get done. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But first, this idea of harmony, because it goes, we have to establish the idea of harmony before we attempt to do this roles and goals thing. Because there has to be a primary kind of concern, a focus that we think is more important than all the goals that we can think of. And so we call this putting first things first. And putting first things first in what we've been talking about means putting assets in front of defects. It has to do with, it's connected to the sixth step in the recovery programs where we become willing to let these defects go, to ask for their removal. And it's the idea of ordering our mind in a way that we access those assets of character rather than the defects. And but it also means, putting first things first means in the traditional sense of putting God first. And when I say putting God first, I don't mean in a context of we see God as some big guy in the sky sitting on some kind of a throne, and that he has need of us to be sitting at his feet in some, because that's just not the case. What we're talking about when we say put God first is think about God as being the all of everything. Think about God as being the whole of creation, and not Santa Claus off in the clouds, but the whole of creation. So then what we're saying then in this idea of priorities and putting first things first is that we're going to put the unity of all life first. So that's our primary concern. And it leads to our primary purpose of giving service in whatever way we are equipped to give service to that common welfare, to the unity of all life. And so this is the primary concern. And all the other roles and goals come after that. And if they don't, no matter how many goals we achieve, we will never be happy, we'll never be satisfied, because we forgot that the most important thing was this unity, harmony, to be in harmonious relationship with the rest of life. So there's the number one goal. Now, meaning the common welfare, right? So we're talking about first tradition. We put the common welfare first, and it tells us in that first tradition, it tells us why we put the common welfare first, because our personal well-being depends upon unity. So it's amazing how all this goes together. It just all fits together very nicely. So harmony is the first goal. Harmony is it's a state of mind. It is a feeling, it's a sense of knowing that we're not in conflict. And in order to establish that sense, and we all have the ability to do it, but the only way that we can do it is to practice quietness, to practice being quiet. So here, to establish the first goal, to get ourselves into harmony, we have to start off our day with some quietness. We have to establish that habit of prayer and meditation. And then after doing that for a while, what ends up happening is we can establish that state of mind anytime, any place, because we get good at it, just like any other skill. I mean, if you look, there's a lot of literature about this, but it's not something that happens just because we wish it would happen. It's not something that we can just say, oh, okay, now I'm going to be a meditator, and all of a sudden we're able to just enter the silence immediately. It comes from practice, and I will just say that it's worth the time invested, because what it does then is it establishes us from the beginning. It establishes us in this foundation of peace and harmony, which then can be accessed no matter where we go. So all that being said then, so now that you're all harmonious and you're peaceful, the thing we want to do at this time of year, you don't have to participate, but it's, everybody has wishes, everybody has hopes and dreams, and these things we need to decide what it is that's important to us. What do we want to do? We can look, so the first thing in this process would be to look at the previous year and say, okay, what good was accomplished? What could I have done better? What habits would I like to eliminate? What new habits would I like to establish? And just get a kind of an overall feel and see what, that's the other thing. Inventory is so helpful. I know sometimes it's a pain. You can call it journaling if you don't want to call it inventory, if it makes you feel better. You're just journaling, that's all. And you write down what's going on in your mind. And it's just amazing how when it's written on a piece of paper, it looks different than when it was running around in our minds. And we can actually determine by looking at it whether we're actually telling ourselves the truth or not. It's amazing that you can see on the page, and you can see and say, oh no, that's just really not the truth. So the inventory is important, to make a decision and say, you know what, I'm tired of repeating the same mistakes over and over again, expecting different results. I'm tired of it. I want to do something different. And so we make a conscious decision, I want something different. And once having made that decision and establishing that peace inside, we go forward and decide what it is that we want to do. And so I use a model that Stephen Covey introduced me to that is called roles and goals. And what we do is we look at the different roles we play in our life. And I'll give you some examples. And I'll just use the ones that I have. I have the role of family man, family person, if you will. Now some people put the role father, they break it up. But what he says, what Stephen Covey said, is you shouldn't have any more than 7. Because if you have any more than 7 roles, it's going to be very difficult to see progress because you're just too scattered. So you got to pick out these 7 things in your life, these 7 roles you play in life that are the most important. I say 5. 5 works pretty good. So you say, well, so I'm a family person, right? Then I'm a spiritual student. Now you can call this, now when I say I'm a spiritual student, that means, to me, that includes being a recovering person. That includes, all the things that I do here. Because to me, it all goes together. It's all like one thing. But maybe for you, it's not. Maybe you have to break that up. But we are all students. School is never out as long as we're living. And even in the society and the culture that we live in now, there's no end to it either. I mean, just when we're talking about formal learning, in order for us to keep up with the changes as fast as they are happening, we have to have an open mind and continue to learn just to cope. Just think if you would have fallen asleep for the last 10 years and all of a sudden you woke up, what that would seem like. In 10 years, is it just such an amazing change in the way everything's going. So we keep on top of things, we're always students. But thinking about being a spiritual student, it also, one of the roles in that is that we're teachers, because there is no, it goes both ways. There is no just learn. We're just learning. We're interacting with each other. So we're learning from each other, and we're teaching each other like all the time, right? We're actually teaching who we are. We're teaching others who we are. And so that's another thing to be thinking about is what do I want to present? Right? What is it? What is it that I want to teach others about who I am? So then there's a we have a financial role. Each of us, you may not think of yourself this way, but each one of us is a financial entity. You may think you're not as large of an entity as you would like to be. But each of us has this financial role. And we need to decide, we need to look at our finances. Here comes another inventory. It's a very helpful thing to actually keep a journal of what you spend, because you have no idea. I remember the first time I did it, and when I talk about keeping a journal of what I spent, I mean every time. Just keep a little notebook in your pocket, and every time you go to the store, every time, any money that comes out, just make a quick little note. It's kind of funny because when you do that, a lot of times it'll be too much trouble to make the note, so you won't spend the money. I don't need that. So, but once having done this for a month, and go back and look at the journal and see what you spent money on, it's amazing. You go, wait a minute, I spent that much money on Starbucks and I didn't buy a single book all month. I spent this much money doing these things that didn't amount to anything, and I didn't buy one piece of clothing for myself. And so we get an idea about where the money's going and what's happening, and we make a decision. Well, where do I want to spend it? I want to change this around a little bit and make a decision where I'm going to spend the money. And the goals need to be, as much as possible, they need to be measurable, so that we can actually see that we did it. So it's like this. There was a few years ago, we were working on this, and there were a number of people in our group that wanted to go to the NA World Convention in Hawaii. It was 2 years away. And people were saying, well, there's no way that I could afford to go there. And what we did was we just sat down and broke down the goal. And this is how goals work. You say, this is the amount of money it's going to cost to go to Hawaii for a week. The airfare, the cost of the convention, food, everything, it's this amount of money. And it was a couple $1,000, $2,500, something like that. And then we broke it down. So this is how the goal works. You say, I would have this goal in 2 years. I got to have this $2,500. That means I have to have $1,200 this year and $1,200 next year saved for this goal. And so what that means is that I've got to save $100, because you break it down to the month then, right? So I've got to save $100 this month in order to have $1,200 at the end of the year, so I can have $2,400 at the end of the 2 years. So $100 a month, $25 a week, unless you wanted to be totally accurate and divide 100 by 4.3, but it's an odd number, so we just say 25 bucks a week. Got to save 25 bucks a week, right? And so then I say, well, if I got to save 25 bucks a week, you could divide it by 7, or you could divide it by 5. If you say, well, really, whatever. You divide it by whatever number you want, but you got to save $5 a day. Just say you got to save $5 a day. If you do save $5 a day 7 days a week, then you got even extra money when you get to Hawaii, right? So $5 a day, what's that? I don't know, pack of cigarettes. Cheap cigarettes. So, a $1.50. I mean, look how simple this is when we break it down like that. We say, that's all I have to do is I just have to look at my spending goal, and I say, all I got to do is eliminate that one little thing there that really didn't mean anything anyway. I could actually make a pot of coffee at home for a lot cheaper. And one of the things that we do here, we make coffee, like we're making coffee all the time. We never throw coffee away. If there's coffee left over today, it goes in a little thing and it goes in the refrigerator. And it turns into iced coffee later. So, I mean, just thinking about this financial thing, it really gives a picture of how all these goals can be broken down. Anything that I want to do. So then I have the goal, and I know this is an aspiration, but I'm going to say it out loud. I have the goal or the role of being an athlete. I know it doesn't necessarily look like it, but it's in my mind. And so in that goal of being an athlete, in that role, I have goals associated with that, and they have to do with weight that I want to be at, the different things that I can do, but it can all be broken down. So if I want, and this is actually just arithmetic too. I can actually say that although it's not a perfect science, I can lose this much weight by not eating that many calories, right? I mean, and actually I can come up with a number of what it is. If I want to gain some weight, I say I need to eat this many more calories, and it'll be at least close. So there's behaviors that go along with the goals, and I can break it down and just say, okay, by this date I want to lose this much. If I want to train for a marathon, I don't. But I could. I've got to decide, how do I get to the point where I can run 26 miles? And also the point 2 at the end. I want to be able to do that, right? So I say, well, how do I break it down? Well, first I might want to ask somebody who's done it. There's probably plenty of literature out there that kind of could give you a plan to do it. But it's going to be something like this. You start out running 5 miles, maybe. If you run at all. If you don't run at all, you start out running 2 miles. You start out running 1 mile and walking the other mile. But you build it up, and you decide over a course of time, I'm going to add mileage. And I'm going to do it in a way that doesn't tear my body down. And it turns out, actually, when you're training for a marathon, that nobody actually trains and runs the 26.2 miles in any training run. Nobody actually does that. They run, at the most, they may run 20 miles. But generally, about 13 miles in a week. You make sure you do one 13-mile run in a week, and then every other week you may do that 20 mile just to see if you can get it done. But, so by doing that though, you start out, just think about that. You start out running 2 miles, and then you find out that you can run a marathon. My daughter has done it a number of times. She never was a runner. She ran New York and Chicago, but she did it just by that method. So anything we want. Now this is the important thing is that we make a conscious decision. Instead of just letting life happen and then complaining about it, we make a decision. What do we want? What do we want to do? Well, I'll tell you what I want to do. One of the things I want to do is I want to work 12 steps. That's what I like to do. I like to work 12 steps. So I'm a member of the Step of the Month Club. I formally work a step every month. If there's a new person, it's not a bad idea to decide that you want to work a step every month. And then by the time you got a year, you've worked all 12 steps. Now I do it to keep in practice. I actually do it because every time I do it, I get a deeper insight into what it is that I'm doing. Now also, I have a practice of working all 12 steps every day, but still, I'm focused on a certain step every month. Well, it's pretty easy. There's 12 months in the year. I'll know for sure if I got it done. If at the end of January, the first step's complete, I know whether I met my goal or not. This is like so measurable. So as far as being a family person, I had the goal. I said, I want to, I'm really not seeing my dad enough. I should go and see him more. That's not a goal. To see my dad more is not a goal. It's an idea. A goal is, I'm going to go see my dad every Sunday. Then I know whether I win or not. A goal is, I'm going to say, you know what, I need a refresher, I'm going to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. That's a goal. I got a calendar. Every day I go to a meeting, put a check mark on the calendar. And I know I did it, right? I'm going to go to church every Sunday. I know, it's really hard. But make a check mark. I did it. I know I did it. If I didn't do it, I'm going to go twice one of those weeks. Oh, it's okay. It's all right. So, by doing this, see, the meditation was about rational thought, critical thinking. What we have a tendency to do is to complain about what's going on in our life, look for reasons, and we alternately beat ourselves up, but we also project onto other people and situations that it's, because we don't want to, we actually believe it's all our fault. But we don't want to be considering that. We don't want to think about it being all our fault. So we project it onto others and do judgmental things with them. And then we're not getting what we want in life, but we can decide to change it. we can make a decision. What is it that we want to do? Maybe, you know, as far as the student thing, maybe I want a degree. I need to figure out how does that work? Instead of just thinking, yeah, someday I'm going to go back to school, how does that help anything? Then I'm always thinking, someday I'm going to do something. We make a decision what we're going to do, we put a plan into place, and then we're quiet. And we wait for this guidance that will come from within as to whether or not it's an appropriate goal. Because you know what, and I'm saying, this will work for anything. You can decide that you want some material thing. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But if it becomes an obsession, and if going after the material thing interferes with what we said at the beginning was the first thing, then it's just not going to work out. It's just not going to be, well, first, it's not going to be satisfying. It's interesting, there's a number of people in the world, a lot of them actually, who are goal setters, who set goals, and they get to the goal, and then they set another goal, and that's fine. But I don't want the reason that I set another goal to be because I wasn't fulfilled by the achieving of the first one. I don't want to be just a person that's going through life setting goals and then reaching the goal by any means possible, and then the only way that I can feel okay about myself is to set the next goal. I always want to be thinking about the goals being part of this fabric of life in which I am in harmony with the rest of life. And so whatever these things are, I want to make sure, and you know what, it can sneak in an insidious way. Like just let's say, for example, the training for the marathon. Well, I could decide I want to train for the marathon, and I actually could if I wanted to. Don't be thinking I couldn't, because I could. I could decide I'm going to train for the marathon, I'm going to run a marathon. But what if in doing that,